In the heart of Alaska, a land both beautiful and unforgiving, where mountains tower like ancient sentinels over dense forests and rivers carve their way through vast, untouched wilderness, one man made a choice that would define the rest of his life. His name was Dick Proenneke, and his story is not just one of survival, but of courage, determination, and a profound understanding of what it means to live deliberately. Many people spend their entire lives seeking comfort, convenience, and security, yet Dick chose a path few would dare to take. He left behind the familiar rhythms of society, the hum of cities, and the predictability of modern life, venturing into the unknown to embrace solitude, self-reliance, and the raw, unfiltered beauty of the natural world. In 1968, at the age of 51, Dick stood at a crossroads. Most people at that stage of life are thinking about retirement, perhaps slowing down, settling into routines that require little effort, and enjoying the comfort they have built over decades. But Dick had a different vision for his life, a vision shaped not by material possessions, by status, or by the approval of others, but by a deep and personal calling to immerse himself in the wilderness, to strip life down to its most essential elements, and to test the limits of his own abilities. He had grown weary of the distractions, the noise, and the superficiality that so often accompany modern society. He yearned for simplicity, for clarity, and for a life where every action had purpose and meaning. Dick's decision was not a sudden impulse born of frustration or a fleeting whim. It was the culmination of years of reflection, observation, and preparation. He had always been drawn to the outdoors, fascinated by the rhythms of nature and the resilience of those who lived close to the land. His skills as a carpenter and mechanic, honed over decades, gave him the confidence that he could survive in a remote wilderness. But more than skills, it was his mindset, his patience, his discipline, and his willingness to embrace solitude that prepared him for what lay ahead. Unlike many who dream of escaping into the wild, Dick understood that such a life demanded more than courage. It demanded foresight, adaptability, and a deep respect for the environment. Before making his move, Dick spent countless hours planning. He studied maps of Alaska, chose the location of Twin Lakes with care, and considered the resources he would need to sustain himself. He envisioned the cabin he would build, the food he would hunt and fish, and the routines that would shape each day. This preparation was not merely practical, it was a philosophical exercise. Dick wanted a life where he was fully aware of his actions and their consequences, where every choice mattered, and where he could live in harmony with the land rather than in opposition to it. Leaving civilization behind was not just a physical departure. It was an emotional and psychological challenge. To walk away from family, friends, and the familiarity of society requires courage of a special kind. There is a fear that comes with isolation, the knowledge that one will be entirely responsible for one's own survival, and the understanding that help may be days, weeks, or even months away. But Dick did not see these challenges as obstacles. He saw them as opportunities to test himself, to grow, and to discover what life could be when stripped to its most fundamental truths. As he journeyed into the Alaskan wilderness, Dick's senses became attuned to the land in ways most people never experience. The cold was sharper, the wind more biting, the snow deeper, and the silence more profound. Yet within this harshness, he found a kind of beauty that could not be replicated in a city or town. The mountains rose majestically, their peaks dusted with snow even in the summer months. Rivers glimmered in the sunlight, teeming with fish and life. Forests stretched endlessly, a tapestry of green and brown, alive with the sounds of birds, the rustle of leaves, and the occasional distant howl of wolves. In this environment, Dick felt alive in a way that he never had before, fully aware of the interconnection between all living things and the delicate balance that sustained them. Dick's first steps into the wilderness were both literal and metaphorical. Every footfall on the forest floor was a reminder that he was leaving behind everything he knew. Every decision, from how to pitch a tent to where to gather firewood, carried weight and significance. He quickly realized that the wilderness demanded respect, that it was neither friend nor foe, but a force to be understood, observed, and honored. This mindset, one of humility and attentiveness, would serve him well in the years to come, allowing him not only to survive but to thrive. The solitude that many fear became a source of clarity and reflection for Dick. Without the constant distractions of society, he was free to observe the natural world in minute detail. He noticed the way the snow settled on tree branches, the patterns of animal tracks in the mud, and the subtle changes in the weather that signaled the arrival of a storm. Every observation was recorded in his journals, a practice that would continue for decades. These journals were more than mere notes. They were a dialogue between Dick and the wilderness, a record of his thoughts, experiences, and the lessons he learned from living in harmony with nature. Dick's choice to live alone also allowed him to cultivate a deep sense of independence and self-reliance. He learned to rely on his own skills and resourcefulness, to solve problems creatively, and to adapt to circumstances beyond his control. When equipment broke, he repaired it. When food was scarce, he found alternatives. When storms threatened, he prepared with foresight and diligence. Each challenge was met not with panic or despair, but with calm determination and careful planning. In this way, the wilderness became both his teacher and his laboratory, testing his abilities and strengthening his character. Yet Dick's life in the wilderness was not solely about survival. It was about discovery, the discovery of his own capabilities, the discovery of the profound beauty and complexity of the natural world, and the discovery of a way of living that prioritized meaning, purpose, and connection over convenience, comfort, or material wealth. In the stillness of the Alaskan forests, Dick found a clarity of mind that few experience in the rush of modern life. He understood the value of time, the importance of observing carefully, and the power of living intentionally. As he settled into this new life, Dick also recognized the importance of routine and structure. The days followed the rhythm of nature, hunting and fishing, chopping wood, maintaining the cabin, and recording observations in his journals. Each activity was purposeful, each task a contribution to his survival and well-being. This disciplined approach allowed him to feel a sense of accomplishment and control, even in the face of the vast and unpredictable wilderness. Dick's story is remarkable not only because of the challenges he faced, but because of the mindset he brought to them. He approached the wilderness with respect, curiosity, and patience. He understood that living in harmony with nature required observation, adaptation, and a willingness to learn from mistakes. He did not seek to conquer the land, but to coexist with it, to understand its rhythms, and to live in a way that honored its power and beauty. In the end, Dick Proenneke's decision to leave civilization was about more than just escaping the noise of modern life. It was about seeking authenticity, purpose, and a deeper connection to the world around him. It was about testing the limits of his own abilities and discovering what it truly means to live deliberately. In a society obsessed with speed, technology, and constant stimulation, Dick's choice reminds us of the value of simplicity, patience, and self-reliance. His journey into the Alaskan wilderness was the beginning of a remarkable life, a life defined not by fame or fortune, but by courage, resilience, and a profound understanding of the natural world. For Dick, the wilderness was not just a place to live. It was a teacher, a companion, and a canvas upon which he would craft a life of extraordinary depth and meaning. And as he took those first steps into the forest, he embarked on a journey that would last 30 years, a journey that would inspire countless people and leave a lasting legacy of courage, determination, and the enduring call of the wild. Dick's story teaches us that the choices we make, the paths we take, and the challenges we embrace define the essence of our lives. It is a reminder that living deliberately, with intention and awareness, can lead to a richness of experience that few ever encounter. And it is a testament to the power of courage, independence, and the human spirit to thrive even in the most remote and unforgiving corners of the world. Upon arriving at Twin Lakes in the vast Alaskan wilderness, Dick Proenneke faced a challenge that many would find insurmountable. The landscape was breathtaking, yet raw and unyielding. Towering spruce and hemlock trees surrounded him, rivers flowed swiftly over rocky beds, and mountains rose dramatically in every direction, their snow-capped peaks glinting in the sunlight. It was a place of extraordinary beauty, but it was also a place that demanded respect, resourcefulness, and unwavering determination. For Dick, the first step toward a sustainable life was to create a home, a sanctuary that would protect him from the unforgiving weather, provide a space to work and reflect, and anchor his life in this wild environment. Every aspect of building the cabin required thought, skill, and patience. Unlike modern construction, where power tools, prefabricated materials, and large crews can accomplish a task in days, Dick had to rely on himself and the resources the land provided. He had studied techniques for log cabin construction, understood the properties of different woods, and was well versed in the mechanics of building, but knowledge alone was not enough. He needed endurance, careful planning, and a steady hand, because every mistake could have serious consequences in a place so remote. The process began with selecting the site. He needed a location that offered not only a flat, stable foundation, but also access to fresh water, sunlight, and resources like trees suitable for construction. He walked the area, observing the land, feeling the soil underfoot, listening to the sounds of the forest, and imagining where the cabin would sit among the trees. He took into account wind direction, drainage, and natural protection from the elements. The perfect spot would balance practicality with beauty, allowing him to live comfortably while remaining deeply connected to the wilderness. Once the site was chosen, the work truly began. He felled trees by hand using a saw and an axe, carefully selecting each log for strength, straightness, and durability. Every swing of the axe, every precise cut, required both physical strength and meticulous attention. The logs were stripped of bark, shaped to fit snugly against one another, and positioned to form the walls of his cabin. Dick worked methodically, knowing that the integrity of the cabin depended on the precision of each log. There was no margin for error. The cabin itself was modest in size, yet every detail was deliberate. He designed it to be efficient, durable, and in harmony with the surrounding environment. Windows were positioned to capture natural light during the shorter winter days, and the roof was angled to shed snow effectively. Inside, every space had a purpose, from the simple stove that would provide heat and a means to cook, to the shelves and storage spaces where tools, supplies, and food would be kept. Nothing was wasted, and nothing was superfluous. This cabin was more than a shelter. It was a testament to Dick's philosophy of life, where functionality, simplicity, and respect for the land guided every decision. Woodworking became both a necessity and a passion. Dick crafted furniture, utensils, and tools by hand, often from the very trees that surrounded him. Every piece of wood was carefully selected, cut, and shaped. His hands became familiar with the grain, the knots, and the subtle variations that made each log and plank unique. In this work, he found rhythm, satisfaction, and a deep sense of accomplishment. The act of creating was meditative, a way to connect with the environment, and a way to leave a tangible mark on the land without disturbing its natural balance. Life during these early months was not easy. The Alaskan weather was unpredictable and often harsh. Rain, snow, and bitter winds tested Dick's resolve, slowing progress and making each task more difficult. Yet he faced these challenges with patience and ingenuity. He learned to schedule work around the weather, to preserve heat in his makeshift shelters, and to ration food carefully. Every day required effort, but it also provided rewards, progress on the cabin, a growing sense of mastery, and the satisfaction of knowing that he was building a life that was entirely his own. Food procurement was intertwined with cabin construction. While he focused on building, he also fished in the lakes and streams, hunted game, and gathered edible plants. He learned which berries ripened at different times, which roots were safe to eat, and how to store food for the harsh winter months. This self-sufficiency was essential. The wilderness would not tolerate neglect or carelessness. Each meal was a product of effort, skill, and observation, reinforcing the intimate connection between survival and labor in the wild. As the cabin took shape, Dick's daily routine settled into a rhythm dictated by both necessity and nature. He rose with the sun, worked tirelessly until dusk, and then retired to his shelter to rest, plan, and record his activities. Journaling became an integral part of his life. He documented every step of construction, every challenge encountered, and every small victory. These journals would become invaluable, not only as a personal record, but as a detailed account for others to understand and learn from his experience. They reveal not just a process of building a home, but a process of building a life deliberate, mindful, and deeply connected to the environment. Isolation was both a challenge and a teacher. In those first months, Dick was acutely aware that he was entirely alone. There were no neighbors to lend a hand, no nearby stores to replenish supplies, and no immediate help if an accident occurred. Every decision carried weight. The responsibility of survival rested squarely on his shoulders. Yet, rather than succumbing to fear or loneliness, Dick embraced this solitude. He discovered that being alone amplified his awareness, sharpened his senses, and allowed him to observe the natural world with extraordinary clarity. The forest, the river, the mountains, and the sky became companions, teachers, and sources of inspiration. The cabin, once completed, stood as a symbol of resilience and self-reliance. Its walls were built with care, every joint and corner meticulously aligned, every log fitted to withstand the elements. It was a place of warmth and protection, a haven where Dick could rest, work, and reflect. But more than that, it represented a philosophy that human beings, when equipped with knowledge, patience, and determination, can create meaningful lives even in the most remote and challenging environments. Even after the cabin was functional, the work did not end. Maintenance was constant, from reinforcing the roof to chinking the spaces between logs with moss and clay, ensuring insulation and durability. He built furniture, shelving, and storage spaces, each crafted with care to maximize space and utility. Every object in the cabin had a purpose, reflecting Dick's commitment to simplicity and efficiency. Nothing was wasted, and every effort reinforced the connection between human activity and the natural world. The cabin also became a laboratory for experimentation. Dick observed how different woods reacted to moisture, how the heat from the stove affected the air inside, and how the positioning of windows could capture light and warmth. He refined techniques adapted to the unique conditions of the Alaskan environment, and learned from each success and failure. This iterative process, combining observation, reflection, and action, exemplifies the kind of deliberate, mindful living that defined his entire journey. Throughout this period, Dick also cultivated a deep appreciation for the wilderness itself. He noticed the patterns of animal behavior, the subtle shifts in weather, and the seasonal cycles that governed life in the forest. He learned to track game, identify edible plants, and anticipate changes in the environment. Every observation reinforced the idea that survival depended not only on skill and labor, but also on awareness and respect for the natural world. The cabin was his anchor, but the wilderness was his teacher. Woodworking and construction provided more than practical benefits. They offered a sense of purpose and fulfillment. Each log placed, each joint secured, and each tool crafted was a tangible accomplishment, a small victory in a life defined by labor and patience. These activities shaped not only his surroundings, but also his character, reinforcing qualities of resilience, focus, and discipline. In the act of building, Dick found meaning, and in the completion of the cabin, he found a foundation for the life he had envisioned. As the months passed, the cabin evolved from a simple shelter into a true home. It offered warmth during the long winters, a space for reflection and creativity, and a sense of security in a landscape that could otherwise feel vast and overwhelming. The structure stood as a testament to human ingenuity, demonstrating that, even in isolation, a single person with determination and skill could thrive in one of the most remote regions on Earth. Through this work, Dick also developed a profound sense of self-reliance. He relied on his own abilities, judgment, and perseverance. Every success, from the precise fitting of logs to the successful construction of a workbench, reinforced his confidence and independence. He learned that reliance on oneself, combined with careful observation and respect for nature, could provide both security and freedom. The cabin was not merely a physical structure, it was a reflection of Dick's philosophy and approach to life. Every detail, from the layout to the materials used, embodied principles of simplicity, efficiency, and sustainability. It demonstrated a deep understanding of the environment, an ability to adapt, and a commitment to living deliberately. For Dick, this cabin was both a home and a manifesto, a statement of how life could be lived in harmony with nature, with purpose, and with integrity. Even after the basic structure was complete, Dick continued to refine and improve the cabin. He experimented with different techniques for insulation, created furniture suited to the limited space, and adapted the interior layout to optimize comfort and utility. Each modification was informed by experience, observation, and reflection. This continuous process of learning and improvement was central to his way of life, illustrating a mindset that valued growth, skill, and mindful engagement with the world. Through it all, the wilderness remained a constant presence, both inspiring and demanding. The forests, rivers, and mountains were not passive backdrops. They were dynamic, living systems that required attention, respect, and understanding. Dick learned to move through this landscape with care, to read its signs, and to anticipate its changes. In doing so, he developed a profound connection to the natural world, a relationship based on observation, patience, and respect rather than domination. By the end of the first year, the cabin was not only complete, but fully integrated into the landscape. It stood as a functional, durable, and beautiful structure, providing shelter and comfort while reflecting Dick's values and vision. More than that, it represented the culmination of months of effort, learning, and adaptation. It was a tangible expression of self-reliance, skill, and deliberate living, a foundation for the extraordinary life that would follow over the next 30 years in the Alaskan wilderness. Life in the Alaskan wilderness was a world unto itself, a realm defined by rhythm, challenge, and a deep, unbroken connection to nature. For Dick Proenneke, the days were no longer measured by clocks, deadlines, or appointments, but by the rising and setting of the sun, the flow of rivers, the movement of wildlife, and the changing patterns of the weather. Every day demanded focus, resilience, and skill, and every task, no matter how small, carried significance. In this remote and wild landscape, there was no room for carelessness, and survival depended entirely on awareness, preparation, and deliberate action. From the moment Dick awoke each morning, he was engaged with the natural world around him. The air was crisp and cold, carrying the scent of pine and earth, and the sunlight glimmered on the surface of the lake, painting the world in shades of gold and silver. He began his day with practical tasks, ensuring the fire was maintained for warmth and cooking, inspecting the cabin for any weaknesses or damage caused by the previous night's weather, and planning his activities according to the conditions of the day. Every morning was an opportunity to prepare, to observe, and to act with intention, a process that grounded him in the realities of the wilderness and reinforced his growing mastery of life in isolation. Fishing was both a necessity and a skill that Dick had honed over time. The streams and lakes around Twin Lakes were teeming with life, but catching fish in this environment required patience, precision, and a keen understanding of their behavior. He observed the water carefully, noting where fish congregated, the times of day they were most active, and the subtle changes in current and temperature that influenced their movements. With simple tools and his own hands, he fashioned lines, hooks, and nets, learning to read the water as if it were a living map of opportunity. Each successful catch provided nourishment, but also a lesson in observation, timing, and the delicate balance between effort and patience. Hunting presented a different set of challenges, demanding both strategy and respect. The wilderness was populated by creatures that were alert, cautious, and attuned to every movement in their environment. Dick learned to track animals with care, reading the signs left on the ground, the broken branches, the patterns of footprints, and the subtle disturbances in the forest. He understood that hunting was not merely a matter of skill with a weapon, but of understanding behavior, timing, and the intricate dance of predator and prey. Each hunt required preparation, observation, and an ethical approach, ensuring that he took only what was necessary for sustenance while maintaining the delicate ecological balance of the land. Preserving food was another critical part of daily life. In the harsh Alaskan winters, fresh supplies were scarce, and every fish or piece of game needed to be prepared and stored carefully. Dick learned to smoke and dry fish, cure meat, and construct simple storage methods that would protect his provisions from spoilage and from the attention of wildlife. These techniques required not only practical skill, but also a deep understanding of natural processes, including temperature, humidity, and the behavior of animals. Through this work, he developed an intimate knowledge of the land and its resources, understanding how to live within its limits rather than against them. Chopping and splitting wood became a central part of his daily routine, a task that was physically demanding but essential for warmth, cooking, and building projects. Each swing of the axe required precision and energy, and the repetitive rhythm of the work provided a meditative quality, a chance for reflection while simultaneously accomplishing a critical need. Dick learned to recognize the best trees for firewood, how to store it to keep it dry, and how to manage his supplies so that he always had fuel for the long winters. This physical labor was not merely survival. It was a form of discipline, a practice that reinforced resilience, focus, and the satisfaction of tangible accomplishment. Every day, Dick also engaged in careful observation of his environment, a practice that became central to his understanding of life in the wilderness. He tracked the movements of wildlife, noting the patterns of birds, fish, and mammals, and recording his observations in meticulous detail. He observed seasonal changes, noting the first signs of winter, the budding of spring, and the migrations of animals. These observations were more than scientific curiosity. They were vital tools for survival, allowing him to anticipate changes, prepare for challenges, and live in harmony with the cycles of nature. Life in the wilderness was not just about physical labor and survival skills. It was about cultivating patience and perspective. Time moved differently in this environment. The days were marked not by clocks or schedules, but by natural rhythms. The rising sun called him to work. The movement of clouds signaled impending weather changes, and the cycles of the moon guided nighttime activities. This connection to time in its most natural form allowed Dick to develop a sense of rhythm and awareness that was profoundly different from life in civilization. It required attentiveness, adaptability, and a willingness to embrace both the beauty and the challenges of each passing day. In addition to practical skills, creativity and problem-solving were essential. Living in isolation demanded that he improvise solutions to challenges that might seem trivial in a city, but were matters of survival in the wilderness. Broken tools had to be repaired. New solutions for storing food or managing water needed to be devised, and innovative techniques for hunting, fishing, and building were constantly tested. This continuous problem-solving honed his intellect as well as his practical skills, reinforcing the notion that survival in the wild was as much a mental exercise as it was physical labor. Weather was both a teacher and a challenge. Harsh winters, sudden snowstorms, torrential rains, and blistering winds were all realities that Dick had to contend with. He learned to interpret the signs in the clouds, the behavior of animals, and the subtle changes in temperature and wind to anticipate storms and plan his activities accordingly. The ability to read the environment, to prepare for its extremes, and to adapt to its unpredictability was a skill developed over months of careful observation and experience. These lessons extended beyond survival. They became a way of seeing the world, a framework for understanding cause and effect, risk and opportunity, and the delicate balance required to live in harmony with nature. Isolation, while challenging, offered profound opportunities for reflection and personal growth. Without the distractions of modern life, Dick's mind became attuned to subtle details, patterns, and rhythms that most people overlook. He noticed the intricacies of the forest, the behavior of animals, and the changing light of the sky in ways that deepened his understanding of the interconnectedness of life. This heightened awareness brought a sense of peace and clarity, a realization that he was part of a larger system where every action and observation had significance. The solitude was not loneliness. It was a lens through which he could see life more vividly, deeply, and meaningfully. Each day also provided opportunities for creativity and craftsmanship. Beyond the necessities of survival, Dick engaged in woodworking, crafting furniture, tools, and objects that were both functional and beautiful. His hands became instruments of precision and artistry, shaping the raw materials of the forest into objects that reflected skill, care, and intention. This work provided satisfaction beyond the practical. It was a form of expression, a way to leave a mark on the land without disturbing its natural balance, and a way to cultivate pride and mastery in his craft. Physical, fitness, and health were intertwined with daily life. Every activity, from chopping wood to hiking through the forest to carrying water, required stamina, strength, and endurance. There was no separation between work and exercise. Survival itself was a full-body endeavor, demanding continuous effort and attention. Over time, Dick's body adapted to the demands of the environment, growing stronger, more resilient, and attuned to the tasks necessary for living in the wilderness. This physical engagement with the land was not only essential for survival, but also for cultivating a profound connection to his environment. Mental resilience was equally important. The solitude and challenges of the wilderness could test the mind as severely as the body. Dick faced the reality that mistakes could be costly, that nature was indifferent to human needs, and that each decision carried consequences. He developed a mindset of careful reflection, patience, and measured action, learning to balance risk with prudence, intuition with observation, and ambition with restraint. This mental discipline became a cornerstone of his daily life, reinforcing the importance of mindfulness, awareness, and deliberate decision-making in every aspect of existence. Education, in a sense, was continuous. Every encounter, every observation, and every task was a lesson in living deliberately. Dick learned to read the forest like a book, interpreting its signs and rhythms to anticipate challenges and opportunities. He observed animal behavior to improve hunting and fishing success. He studied weather patterns to plan for storms and seasonal changes. He experimented with building techniques to refine the durability and efficiency of his cabin and tools. Each day provided feedback, teaching him about cause and effect, adaptation, and the nuances of life in a remote wilderness. Nature also offered profound moments of beauty and reflection. Sunrises over the mountains, the quiet ripple of water across the lake, the flight of birds against the backdrop of snow-capped peaks. These moments reminded Dick of the grandeur of the world he had chosen to inhabit. These experiences fostered a sense of gratitude, humility, and awe, reinforcing the importance of connection to the land and the value of living attentively. The wilderness was not merely a place of survival. It was a teacher, a companion, and a source of inspiration that enriched every aspect of his daily life. Over time, routines became habits, and habits became a framework for a life of both structure and freedom. Dick's days were guided by necessity, observation, and deliberate choice rather than by societal expectations or artificial schedules. Each task, from chopping wood to repairing tools to journaling observations, contributed to a sense of mastery, purpose, and fulfillment. In this rhythm, he discovered a form of contentment that was deeply satisfying, rooted not in comfort or convenience, but in the knowledge that he was fully engaged in living, fully responsible for his actions, and fully present in the world around him. Through these daily routines, Dick developed a profound understanding of the interdependence between humans and the natural world. He learned that survival depended not only on physical skill, but also on observation, patience, and respect for the ecosystem. Each interaction with the land, from fishing to gathering wood to navigating terrain, reinforced the lesson that humans are part of nature, not apart from it, and that living harmoniously requires attentiveness, knowledge, and humility. The Alaskan wilderness is a land of breathtaking beauty, but it is also a realm of relentless challenge, a place where nature does not yield easily to human ambition, and where survival demands vigilance, skill, and an unwavering respect for the environment. For Dick Proenneke, living in this wilderness meant confronting its extremes head-on, from the biting cold of winter to the isolation of long, dark months, to the storms that could sweep across the land without warning. These challenges were not abstract. They were real, immediate, and often unforgiving. Each day was a test of his abilities, endurance, and adaptability, and each trial carried lessons that would shape the course of his extraordinary life. Winter in Alaska is unlike any winter most people have experienced. The temperatures can drop well below freezing, the wind can cut through layers of clothing like a blade, and the snow can accumulate in vast, unbroken drifts that make travel nearly impossible. For Dick, the onset of winter was both a practical and psychological challenge. It required preparation months in advance, careful attention to provisions, and the fortification of his cabin to withstand the weight of snow, the chill of sub-zero nights, and the long hours of darkness. The wilderness did not offer mercy, and mistakes could be costly. Yet, within this harshness, Dick discovered a rhythm, a structure, and a clarity that few ever experience. Preparation for winter began in late summer and early fall, as Dick meticulously planned his food supplies, fuel, and tools. He had learned from experience that the failure to store enough firewood, to preserve sufficient food, or to repair a leaking roof could be disastrous. Every log chopped, every fish smoked, every repair made to the cabin was part of a broader strategy for survival. In this way, the act of preparing for winter became a ritual, a deliberate engagement with the land that demanded foresight, discipline, and patience. It was a dance with nature's cycles, a careful negotiation with forces far greater than himself. Snowstorms were a constant threat, sudden and unpredictable, capable of isolating him for days or even weeks. When a storm approached, Dick would take measures to secure his cabin, stack firewood in accessible locations, and ensure that his provisions were protected. He learned to read the clouds, the wind, and the behavior of wildlife to anticipate changes in weather. These observations were critical. The wilderness offered no second chances, and being caught unprepared could mean exposure, injury, or worse. Through these experiences, he honed a deep understanding of the patterns and rhythms of nature, developing an intuition that allowed him to anticipate and adapt to the environment in ways that most people never could. The cold itself was an ever-present challenge. Each day required careful attention to clothing, fire, and shelter. Dick had to balance warmth with mobility, layering clothing to conserve heat while maintaining the ability to perform necessary tasks. He maintained a constant fire in his stove, ensuring that his cabin remained a sanctuary from the harsh external conditions. Yet, even within the warmth of his home, he remained acutely aware of the world beyond its walls, the snow-laden trees, the frozen lakes, and the icy winds that swept across the landscape. This awareness was both humbling and instructive, a constant reminder that survival was not a passive state, but an active engagement with the environment. Isolation in the wilderness was another formidable challenge. Unlike a town or village, where neighbors, friends, and services provide social and practical support, Dick was entirely alone. There were no visits, no emergency responders, no nearby supplies. He was fully responsible for his own well-being. This solitude could have been overwhelming, but Dick embraced it as a teacher. He learned to find companionship in the rhythm of daily tasks, in the observation of wildlife, and in the beauty of the natural world. The silence of the wilderness, which might seem oppressive to some, became a source of clarity and reflection. It allowed him to observe deeply, think profoundly, and live intentionally. Each day of winter brought unique lessons. The snow, for instance, was not merely an obstacle, but also a source of knowledge. Dick learned to read its texture, depth, and patterns, which revealed the presence of animals, the approach of storms, and the safety of travel paths. Footprints in the snow told stories, the passage of wolves, moose, or smaller creatures, each carrying information about the ecosystem, food sources, and the rhythms of life. Through these observations, he developed a profound understanding of the interconnectedness of life in the wilderness, recognizing that every action, every movement, and every environmental change carried meaning. Hunting and fishing in winter required adaptation and ingenuity. Fish in the frozen lakes demanded different strategies than in summer months, and game animals moved differently under snow and ice. Dick adapted by modifying his techniques, constructing traps, observing animal behavior, and learning from each attempt. These activities were not just practical necessities, they were exercises in patience, observation, and problem solving. Success was hard, won, and failure was instructive, teaching lessons about timing, strategy, and respect for the creatures that shared his environment. The long periods of darkness in winter presented psychological challenges as well. With only a few hours of sunlight, Dick's days required a careful balance of activity, rest, and reflection. The darkness could be isolating, even disorienting, but it also provided time for thought, planning, and journaling. In these quiet hours, he reflected on his experiences, recorded observations, and contemplated the deeper meaning of his life in the wilderness. This introspection strengthened his mental resilience, allowing him to face adversity with equanimity and clarity. Storms, whether blizzards, heavy rains, or fierce winds, tested both his practical skills and his psychological endurance. When a storm approached, he would secure his cabin, ensure that food and water were accessible, and prepare for potential emergencies. He learned to move safely in low visibility, to navigate treacherous terrain, and to protect himself from exposure. Each storm was a reminder of the power of nature, the importance of preparation, and the need for humility. It reinforced the principle that survival was not a matter of domination over the land, but of respect, understanding, and adaptation. Despite these challenges, the wilderness offered profound rewards. The beauty of snow-laden forests, frozen lakes reflecting the sky, and mountains dusted with frost provided moments of awe and inspiration. The quiet, interrupted only by the wind or the distant calls of animals, created a sense of presence and mindfulness that is rare in the modern world. In these moments, Dick experienced a profound connection to the land, a sense of belonging, and an understanding of the delicate balance that sustains life in such a harsh environment. The lessons of winter extended beyond survival skills. They were lessons in patience, resilience, and the value of deliberate action. Every task, from chopping wood to preserving food to repairing the cabin, required forethought, attention, and perseverance. The consequences of neglect were immediate and often severe, reinforcing the importance of discipline and careful planning. These experiences shaped Dick's character, cultivating qualities of self-reliance, resourcefulness, and the ability to remain calm under pressure. Dick also developed a nuanced understanding of the interplay between risk and reward. The wilderness presented constant hazards: icy rivers, falling branches, hidden crevices, and sudden storms. Yet these risks were balanced by the richness of experience, the sustenance provided by the land, and the satisfaction of accomplishment. Learning to navigate this balance was a central aspect of his life, teaching him the importance of awareness, adaptability, and measured action. Each successful journey, each safe passage, and each land task reinforced the lesson that skill, preparation, and respect for the environment were essential for thriving in the wilderness. Even the smallest observations carried significance. The way snow accumulated on a tree branch could indicate the intensity of an approaching storm. The tracks of a fox could reveal the presence of prey or predators. The pattern of clouds could signal changes in temperature or wind direction. Dick's ability to interpret these signs allowed him to anticipate challenges, make informed decisions, and maintain a sense of control in an environment that was otherwise unpredictable and indifferent. Physical endurance was tested daily, carrying firewood, hauling water, repairing structures, and traversing snow Covered terrain required stamina, strength, and careful attention to technique. Injuries could be serious, as medical help was days or even weeks away. Yet Dick approached these demands with patience, observing his limits, maintaining his health, and developing systems to make physical labor efficient and sustainable. His body became attuned to the demands of the land, capable of enduring conditions that would overwhelm most people. Mental fortitude was equally essential. Isolation, extreme weather, and the constant demands of survival could easily lead to discouragement or despair. Dick countered this through mindfulness, careful planning, and engagement with his environment. Journaling, observing wildlife, and reflecting on his experiences provided structure, meaning, and a sense of accomplishment. The wilderness, though challenging, became a source of clarity, teaching lessons in patience, resilience, and the profound satisfaction of living deliberately. Over time, the challenges of winter fostered innovation and creativity. Dick developed new tools, refined techniques for hunting and fishing, and experimented with methods for insulating his cabin and conserving resources. These innovations were born of necessity, but became part of his broader philosophy of life: to engage fully with each task, to learn from experience, and to seek solutions that respected both the land and his own abilities. In this way, adversity became a catalyst for growth, skill development, and deeper understanding. The passage of seasons brought cycles of challenge and opportunity. As winter gave way to spring, ice melted, rivers swelled, and new life emerged in the forest. The lessons of winter informed his approach to the warmer months, allowing him to anticipate changes, plan for future needs, and navigate the land with confidence. Each cycle reinforced the interconnection between preparation, observation, and survival, highlighting the ongoing dialogue between human effort and natural forces. Storms and winter challenges also reinforced a sense of humility. Nature, with its power and unpredictability, reminded Dick that humans are part of a larger system, subject to forces beyond their control. Respect, attentiveness, and adaptation were essential, not only for survival but for thriving in this environment. This humility was not passive. It was active engagement, a conscious acknowledgement of limits coupled with effort, skill, and observation. It shaped his character, instilling patience, resilience, and a profound appreciation for the complexity and beauty of the natural world. Dick Proenneke's life in the Alaskan wilderness was not merely an existence of survival. It was a deliberate and conscious exploration of what it meant to live fully, mindfully, and in harmony with the natural world. Over the years, as he built his cabin, adapted to the rhythms of the seasons, and faced the relentless challenges of isolation, he began to develop a legacy that extended far beyond his immediate needs for shelter, food, and warmth. His legacy was one of careful observation, meticulous documentation, and a deep, almost philosophical engagement with the environment around him. In the quiet solitude of Twin Lakes, Dick discovered that life, when observed attentively, offered lessons that transcended the practicalities of daily survival and reached into the realm of wisdom, insight, and inspiration. Central to this legacy was his practice of journaling. Every day, Dick recorded the events of his life, the changes in the landscape, the behavior of animals, and the progress of his personal projects. These journals were not simply logs or diaries. They were comprehensive studies of a life lived deliberately. In the pages of his notebooks, one could trace the ebb and flow of seasons, the subtle shifts in weather patterns, and the intricate interplay between flora, fauna, and human activity. Each entry reflected a mind engaged with its surroundings, a consciousness attuned to detail, and a philosophy grounded in respect for nature. The journals became both a personal record and a lasting contribution, capturing the essence of life in one of the most remote and challenging environments on Earth. Through his writings, Dick chronicled not just survival but mastery. He described the techniques he used for building, hunting, fishing, and preserving food with such clarity and precision that they could guide others in similar circumstances. He documented innovations in tools, construction methods, and resource management, reflecting a lifetime of experimentation, observation, and refinement. His journals revealed a man who approached life as a continuous learning process, where every challenge was an opportunity to acquire knowledge, hone skills, and deepen understanding. They stand as a testament to the power of careful observation, reflection, and disciplined practice. Wildlife observation was another cornerstone of Dick's life and legacy. The Alaskan wilderness teemed with life, from the smallest insects to the majestic moose, the elusive lynx, and the ever-watchful wolves. Dick developed a keen eye for animal behavior, learning to interpret movements, tracks, and signs that would often go unnoticed by the casual observer. He recorded these observations with meticulous detail, noting patterns of migration, feeding habits, and interactions between species. This attention to wildlife was both practical and philosophical. Practically, it informed his strategies for hunting, fishing, and coexistence with the environment. Philosophically, it deepened his understanding of interconnectedness, teaching lessons about patience, observation, and respect for the rhythms of life. Dick's cabin, the tangible heart of his wilderness life, also became part of his legacy. Every log, every handcrafted piece of furniture, and every carefully designed tool reflected skill, foresight, and a philosophy of simplicity and sustainability. The cabin was more than shelter. It was a manifestation of a life lived with intention. Its construction demonstrated that a single individual, equipped with knowledge, patience, and perseverance, could create a space of comfort, functionality, and beauty in one of the harshest environments on Earth. It symbolized a commitment to living in harmony with nature, a careful balance between human needs and ecological awareness. Over time, Dick's life in isolation allowed him to cultivate a depth of reflection and philosophical insight rarely found in the modern world. Without the distractions of society, he was able to observe life at a granular level, noticing patterns, cycles, and relationships that are often overlooked. He considered the interplay between human effort and environmental conditions, the impact of each action on the surrounding ecosystem, and the broader lessons that could be drawn from living deliberately and attentively. These reflections, recorded in journals and expressed through his daily work, form a core part of his enduring influence, offering insights into patience, self-reliance, and the value of thoughtful engagement with the world. In addition to his observations of nature and wildlife, Dick also documented his own development as a person. The challenges of isolation, extreme weather, and survival required him to cultivate resilience, adaptability, and a strong sense of purpose. Each hardship, whether it was a bitter winter storm or the failure of a hunting attempt, became a lesson in problem-solving, perseverance, and the limits of human ingenuity. His journals reveal a man who approached obstacles not as insurmountable barriers, but as opportunities for growth, learning, and self-discovery. They capture the transformation of an individual shaped by solitude, labor, and the demands of a wild and unforgiving environment. Dick's legacy is also philosophical in its attention to the concept of simplicity. In the wilderness, he had no use for the trappings of modern life, no technology, no convenience, no distractions. Every need was addressed with skill, foresight, and resourcefulness. This simplicity allowed him to focus on what was truly essential: shelter, sustenance, observation, and personal growth. It is a lesson in intentional living, a reminder that richness of experience comes not from accumulation, but from engagement, mindfulness, and the deliberate choice to invest energy in meaningful pursuits. Over the years, the cumulative effect of his meticulous journaling, observation, and practical work created a body of knowledge that continues to inspire. His insights into wilderness survival, self-reliance, and ecological awareness offer guidance not only for those seeking to live in remote environments, but also for anyone interested in living deliberately with purpose and intention. The depth of his observations, combined with the clarity of his writing, provides a roadmap for understanding the natural world and for cultivating resilience, patience, and wisdom in one's own life. The wildlife he observed played a significant role in shaping his understanding of life's interconnections. By tracking animals, noting seasonal migrations, and studying feeding and breeding patterns, Dick gained insights into the balance of ecosystems and the interdependence of species. He saw firsthand how a change in one part of the environment could ripple through the system, influencing behavior, availability of resources, and the survival of species. These observations reinforced his philosophy of living in harmony with the land rather than attempting to dominate it, teaching lessons in humility, patience, and respect that extended far beyond practical survival. Dick's journaling also reflected his appreciation for the aesthetic and spiritual dimensions of life in the wilderness. He recorded not only practical information, but also reflections on the beauty of the landscape, the patterns of light and shadow, and the quiet majesty of the Alaskan environment. The sight of a sunrise over snow-covered peaks, the reflection of the forest on the still waters of the lake, or the subtle changes in the color of leaves with the passing seasons became moments of contemplation and insight. These observations captured the spiritual dimension of his life, illustrating that immersion in nature can nurture not only physical survival, but also mental clarity, emotional resilience, and a profound sense of wonder. Cumulative effect of years of observation, documentation, and reflection was a comprehensive understanding of life in the wilderness that few humans have ever attained. Dick's journals reveal an individual who not only survived but thrived, transforming the challenges of isolation into opportunities for growth, understanding, and mastery. They demonstrate that a life of simplicity, attentiveness, and intentional action can yield insights into both the external environment and the inner life, offering lessons that extend far beyond the immediate context of survival. Through his careful chronicling of daily life, Dick also provided a window into the practical realities of self-reliance. Readers and viewers can learn about the techniques he used to construct durable shelters, preserve food, craft tools, and navigate challenging terrain. These practical lessons are intertwined with philosophical insights, illustrating that mastery of the external environment is inseparable from mastery of oneself. The skills required for survival in Alaska, patience, observation, adaptability, and resilience, are also skills that nurture personal growth, wisdom, and a deeper understanding of life. Dick's life also embodies the principle of deliberate living. Every action, from the placement of logs in his cabin to the timing of a hunting expedition, was undertaken with intention and awareness. There was no wasted effort, no distraction from trivialities, and no passive reliance on circumstances or external assistance. Each day was a deliberate engagement with the world, a conscious choice to invest time, energy, and attention in meaningful activities. This approach, documented in his journals and reflected in his work, offers a model for anyone seeking to live fully, mindfully, and purposefully. The ethical dimension of his life is also evident. Dick hunted and fished for necessity, taking only what he needed, and always with respect for the land and its creatures. He understood that the wilderness was not a resource to be exploited indiscriminately, but a living system in which every action carried consequences. This awareness of responsibility, stewardship, and balance is a central element of his legacy, demonstrating that survival and ethical living are not mutually exclusive but deeply intertwined. Dick's ability to translate these lessons into enduring insights is part of what makes his story remarkable. His journals, photographs, and observations create a multidimensional legacy that speaks to skill, resilience, wisdom, and philosophical reflection. They offer practical guidance for living in remote environments, inspiration for cultivating self-reliance and discipline, and profound reflections on the interconnectedness of life, the value of simplicity, and the importance of intentional living. In essence, Dick Proenneke's legacy is both practical and philosophical. It encompasses the meticulous skills of a wilderness craftsman, the observational acuity of a naturalist, and the reflective depth of a philosopher. It demonstrates that a life of deliberate engagement, self-reliance, and respect for the natural world can yield insights, wisdom, and satisfaction that far exceed the comforts and conveniences of modern society. It is a legacy that continues to inspire, offering lessons that are timeless, universal, and deeply relevant to anyone seeking meaning, resilience, and purpose in their own lives. Through decades of meticulous documentation, hands-on craftsmanship, and immersive observation, Dick Proenneke left behind more than a story of survival. He created a testament to human ingenuity, patience, and the power of living in harmony with nature. His legacy endures not only in the physical artifacts of his life, the cabin, the tools, the carefully prepared provisions, but also in the philosophical and practical wisdom embedded in his journals. These lessons continue to resonate, inviting us to slow down, observe carefully, act deliberately, and cultivate a life of purpose and connection. Dick Proenneke's life in the Alaskan wilderness stands as one of the most remarkable examples of human resilience, ingenuity, and deliberate living in the modern era. Over the course of 30 years, he transformed a remote patch of land into a sanctuary, a laboratory, and a home, demonstrating that one person, guided by determination, skill, and a deep respect for nature, can not only survive but thrive in the most challenging environments. His story is not simply about survival. It is about the human capacity for adaptation, reflection, and the cultivation of a life imbued with meaning and purpose. As we look back on his journey, the lessons he offers extend far beyond the Alaskan wilderness, resonating with anyone who seeks to live deliberately, responsibly, and in harmony with the world around them. Dick's life invites us to reflect on the power of intentionality. Every action he took was deliberate, guided by observation, planning, and understanding. From selecting the site for his cabin to choosing the logs for construction, from observing animal behavior to planning his winter provisions, each decision was grounded in careful consideration. This intentionality was not born of necessity alone. It reflected a philosophy that valued thoughtfulness, mindfulness, and engagement with one's surroundings. In a world where much of life is dictated by routine, convenience, or external pressures, his example reminds us that conscious choices can create depth, satisfaction, and resilience in our lives. Isolation, often perceived as a challenge or a burden, became a source of insight and growth for Dick. Living alone in the wilderness, removed from the distractions and noise of modern society, allowed him to cultivate clarity, patience, and self-awareness. He learned to understand himself not through reflection in the mirror of society, but through his interactions with nature, his daily routines, and the consequences of his actions. This solitude offered a form of freedom, enabling him to live according to his own standards, values, and rhythms. It is a lesson that resonates deeply, that isolation, when approached deliberately, can foster creativity, insight, and self-mastery, revealing aspects of life and character that are often obscured in the bustle of human society. The story of his cabin is emblematic of the broader lessons of his life. Constructed entirely by hand, with no assistance beyond the natural resources of the land, the cabin reflects principles of resilience, sustainability, and adaptability. Each log, joint, and handcrafted tool embodies skill, foresight, and dedication. It demonstrates that meaningful accomplishments are the result of persistent effort, observation, and engagement with the world, rather than reliance on convenience or external support. In this way, the cabin is more than a physical structure. It is a metaphor for the life Dick built for himself, one rooted in self-reliance, discipline, and a deep connection to his environment. One of the most enduring aspects of his life was his meticulous journaling. Over decades, Dick documented every element of his daily existence, construction techniques, weather patterns, wildlife behavior, and reflections on the nature of life itself. These journals were not merely records. They were tools of insight, reflection, and growth. They allowed him to learn from experience, identify patterns, and refine his strategies for living. They also provide an invaluable resource for future generations, offering practical guidance and philosophical reflection. Through these writings, Dick ensured that his knowledge, insights, and experiences would not be lost, extending the impact of his life far beyond the boundaries of Twin Lakes. Dick's engagement with the natural world was marked by deep observation and respect. He did not seek to conquer the wilderness, but to live in harmony with it. He studied animal behavior, noted the changing seasons, and learned to anticipate environmental shifts. This attentiveness taught him valuable lessons about the interconnectedness of all life, the consequences of human action, and the importance of humility. By observing, learning, and adapting, he demonstrated that humans can coexist with nature, not as exploiters, but as participants, cultivating a life that is both sustainable and deeply fulfilling. The philosophical dimensions of his life are equally compelling. Through decades of solitude and engagement with nature, Dick explored themes of patience, perseverance, and the pursuit of meaningful work. He discovered that satisfaction is derived not from comfort or convenience, but from mastery, understanding, and deliberate effort. Every challenge he faced, harsh winters, storms, isolation, and the demands of survival, became an opportunity to cultivate resilience, focus, and wisdom. His story illustrates that adversity, when approached with awareness and skill, can be transformative, shaping character and deepening understanding. His life also underscores the importance of observation and learning. In the wilderness, survival depended on noticing patterns, anticipating change, and responding thoughtfully. Dick's acute attention to detail allowed him to identify opportunities, mitigate risks, and live harmoniously with the environment. This lesson extends to all areas of life. Careful observation, critical thinking, and responsiveness are key to thriving in complex and unpredictable contexts. By observing deeply and acting deliberately, one can navigate challenges with confidence, adaptability, and insight. Dick's engagement with craftsmanship and manual labor also offers profound lessons. Through woodworking, tool making, and cabin construction, He cultivated skills that were both practical and expressive. The act of creation, of transforming raw materials into functional and beautiful objects, became a form of meditation, reflection, and self-expression. It reinforced the connection between effort and reward, skill and understanding, labor and satisfaction. In a society often dominated by abstraction and digital engagement, his hands-on approach to life reminds us of the value of tangible work, the insights gained through physical effort, and the fulfillment derived from mastery. Simplicity was a guiding principle in Dick's life. With no reliance on modern conveniences, every aspect of his existence was pared down to essentials: shelter, sustenance, warmth, and purposeful work. This simplicity allowed him to focus on what truly mattered, to cultivate skills, and to develop an intimate understanding of the natural world. It also created space for reflection, observation, and philosophical contemplation. His life demonstrates that by removing distractions and focusing on essentials, one can experience a depth of engagement, clarity, and satisfaction that is often inaccessible in the modern world. His careful documentation of the environment provides insights into the cycles and rhythms of nature. Over decades, Dick observed changes in animal populations, seasonal variations, and long-term ecological patterns. These records not only informed his own survival strategies, but also contributed to a broader understanding of wilderness ecosystems. By paying attention to detail and recording observations faithfully, he left a legacy of knowledge that continues to inspire and educate, demonstrating the enduring value of careful study, patience, and reflection. Dick's story also carries lessons in resilience and problem-solving. Every challenge, whether it was a storm, a frozen lake, a failed hunting attempt, or an injury, required ingenuity, adaptability, and persistence. He developed solutions through careful thought, experimentation, and observation, refining techniques over time. This approach underscores the principle that obstacles are not merely problems to be overcome, but opportunities to learn, innovate, and grow. Resilience, skill, and perseverance are cultivated not through ease, but through engagement with difficulty, and Dick's life exemplifies this truth in every respect. The ethical dimension of his life is equally important. Dick took only what he needed from the land, respected animal populations, and sought to live sustainably within his environment. His approach reflects a philosophy of stewardship and responsibility, illustrating that human existence need not be at odds with nature. By observing, understanding, and respecting the land, he demonstrated that survival and ethical living are not mutually exclusive, but mutually reinforcing. This principle remains highly relevant today, offering guidance for anyone seeking to balance human needs with environmental responsibility. The enduring inspiration of Dick Proenneke's life lies in its demonstration of what is possible when one chooses to live deliberately, attentively, and with purpose. His 30 years in the wilderness were a testament to human potential, a narrative of self-reliance, ingenuity, and reflection. His life challenges assumptions about the limits of human endurance, the necessity of social dependence, and the nature of fulfillment. He shows that a meaningful life is not measured by material accumulation, social status, or external